So trauma is often talked about like it's something that happens in a single moment. But if you've been following me for a while, you know that that's not true because the trauma doesn't stop at the event itself, right? Trauma has a way of shaping us throughout our entire lives from childhood into adulthood. Hey y'all, I'm Dr. Andrea Michelle, a developmental psychologist and certified trauma sensitive coach and consultant. And today I'm going to be exploring the lasting effects of trauma across the lifespan from your early years into adulthood. So, have you ever wondered why childhood trauma can lead to struggles later in life, or why some traumatic experiences in adulthood feel like it's harder to heal? Well, I'm going to be breaking down how trauma impacts us at different stages of our lives in childhood, in adolescence, in adulthood, and what healing looks like at each stage. So if you're curious, keep listening, keep watching. Okay, let's start with childhood. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I have some other videos that focus specifically on childhood trauma. But when we think about how trauma affects a child's brain and body, childhood, which is 0 through 12 years old, is the most vulnerable stage when it comes to trauma. And this is because the child's brain is still developing, right? And traumatic experiences can literally rewire how the brain perceives safety, relationships, and the world. And some effects of childhood trauma, really quickly, because again, I've shared it already, is hypervigilance or shutdown. And this is where they either are in constant fear or experience emotional numbness. They have difficulty forming secure bonds with their caregivers. They experience emotional dysregulation with frequent outburst, anxiety, or extreme withdrawal. And they also can experience delayed cognitive development, right? And this is important because that means that they could struggle with focus, learning, and memory. And then finally, they have increased health risk, like chronic illnesses, a weakened immune system. And there's some research that talks about the link between trauma and asthma. And I'm not going to really go into that because I'm still like fully immersing myself in that research now. But there are increased health risks with children who experience trauma. And again, this is from ages 0 to 12. Now, trauma in adolescence is extremely challenging. And the reason why is because adolescence, in and of itself, without any experiencing any trauma, is a critical time because the brain is undergoing massive changes. And this is also when identity is forming and social relationships become incredibly important, right? This is a time when our teenagers are moving away from the family, the parents' guidance, and they're moving closer to their peers. So, trauma in adolescence can bring about increased risk taking and reckless behavior. So, engaging in dangerous activities, including substance use, self harm, sexual behavior, it becomes more likely when an individual experiences trauma. There's also emotional instability, right? There are these intense mood swings. There is depression or heightened anxiety. And then they also have difficulty trusting others, right? And that is because they have this fear of betrayal, or they experience some sort of emotional detachment. They also struggle with their identity. And because of their struggles with their identity, they often feel disconnected from themselves and others. And the reason why they feel disconnected from themselves is because, as I said earlier, they are slowly moving away from the identity that their parents created for them, and they're carving out their own. And so they struggle with their identity, and that makes them feel disconnected from themselves and others. And finally, they have difficulty concentrating. They may try to avoid school altogether. And this is important, they struggle with perfectionism, which is driven by fear. And the perfectionism part is harder to detect because typically we think that if someone, a child, especially a teenager, is the perfectionist, that, oh my gosh, they're smart, they have it together, and everything is going well for them, they're getting good grades. But it is critically important to keep in mind that this perfectionism that you see, it could be a trauma response, right? And so what that may look like is a teenager who experienced childhood neglect. They may struggle trusting authority figures like teachers or like coaches when they're in school. And because of this, they may act out, they may withdraw completely, or seek validation in unhealthy relationships. And so that's why it's also important for you as an adult, as a caregiver, as a parent, to talk to them about risk-taking behaviors, talk to them about reckless behavior, including intimate partner violence in adolescence.
Okay, so you may be wondering, well, how does trauma manifest itself in adulthood? The good news or hopeful news for you is that by adulthood, trauma often shows up in patterns. And it shows up in patterns in relationships, in self worth, and even how we respond to stress, right? There are many people who don't even realize that they're carrying around unhealed trauma until they start seeing it in their daily lives. So, most of my clients on paper, they are successful. They are executives, they are leaders, they're entrepreneurs. They make the money, they have the material goods, the houses, the cars. Some of them have families, some of them don't because they choose, or it's just where they are in life. But one of the things that they notice is that the same thing keeps happening. And so when they come to me, they share, hey, I've done this, I've done that. On paper, I look good, but I notice this same thing keeps happening. Or every time I get to this point in a relationship, this thing happens. Or every time I reach this income level, this thing happens, right? So they notice it in patterns. And so the effects of trauma in adulthood is chronic stress and burnout. If you're guilty, just do like this. That's me, right? And what this looks like is difficulties managing responsibilities. It can also be workaholism, always going to work, always working, never stop working, but always saying, oh, but I need to do this, workaholism, or complete avoidance, right? Also, you'll notice relationship difficulties. You may have fear of intimacy, or you could experience codependency, and in some cases, emotional detachment. There's also mental health struggles, mental health challenges like anxiety, depression. Sometimes all of this can lead to PTSD or dissociation. And then also, and I think this is critically important, especially today, because I've been hearing a lot about this lately, is if you experience like unexplained pain, right? There's something bothering you. You go to the doctors, can't diagnose you with anything, and they've run all the tests. This could be an effect of trauma in adulthood. Now, like everything, like research, it's emerging, right? Some things they're still learning about. And so that's not to say because you don't have an official diagnosis that it's trauma related. I'm only putting this out there that research shows that there could be unexplained pain as a result of trauma, autoimmune diseases, and chronic fatigue. And then finally, which I think is most important, is self-sabotage and limiting beliefs, right? And that's that feeling of not being good enough, or not feeling like you are ever enough, or not feeling like you are worthy, or getting stuck in negative cycles, right? That negative self-talk. It is literally on repeat, like a broken record. All of these things is the effect, or could be the effect of trauma, because the presence of these things doesn't necessarily mean that you have experienced trauma, but they could potentially be the effect. And so don't try to explain away these things. Don't deny it. If you know you may have experienced trauma, then just sit with these. So an adult who experienced like emotional neglect as a child may struggle with feelings of unworthiness, right? which could lead you to overworking yourself to prove your value. Or you could push people away for fear of rejection. So just because you experience trauma in childhood, it doesn't mean that the lasting impact is not with you today as a full-grown adult. Really quickly, when we think about why trauma shows up differently at each stages, the reason why that is because each stage of development, childhood, adolescence, and adulthood, they have their own challenges. So in childhood, the challenge is, trusting caregivers and regulating emotions. In adolescence, it is trusting peers and self-worth and impulsivity. And then in adulthood, it is the challenges are, deal with intimacy, career stability, and managing stress, right? And so it shows up differently at each stage, and that's because each stage has a different challenge. As I've said before in my previous videos, healing is possible at any stage of life. While childhood trauma may feel deeply rooted, remember that the brain has the ability to create new pathways, right? And it is possible to heal from childhood trauma or from teen trauma in adulthood. And so for people who have experienced childhood trauma, focus on building safety and trust in your relationships right now today. For people who have experienced trauma in adolescence, 13 through 18, although anything under 18 is technically childhood trauma, focus on healthy coping strategies and identity formation, right? Focus on trying to discover who you are and create a definition of yourself that feels most aligned with not necessarily who you are now, but who it is that you want to be, while also recognizing where you are, because we don't want to deal in toxic positivity. We don't want to deal in like any sort of spiritual or any other type of bypassing, right? Recognize where you are today and then focus on who is it that you want to become and take steps to move towards that person. And for adults who are carrying trauma, focus on self-awareness and breaking old patterns, because remember, trauma manifests itself in patterns, and really tap into and learn how to regulate your nervous system. Because while it is not your fault what happened to you, trauma is not your fault. You didn't create it. You didn't ask for it. You didn't bring it on yourself. Healing from it is 100% your responsibility. So now that we've explored the effects of trauma throughout the lifespan, childhood, adolescence, and adulthood, I would love for you to share what stood out for you. Did you learn anything new from this discussion that we've had on what it looks like in different stages of life? Leave a comment. I would love for you to follow, like, share this video with someone who you think could benefit from this information. And before I go, just understand and remember that healing is possible and you are not alone on your journey. There are far more people than probably who care to admit who have experienced some sort of trauma throughout their lives. So you are 100% not alone. If you need help, reach out to some people, build a support system, a safe support system for yourself, because it is your right to heal from whatever it is that you've experienced.